Welcome to the Magnetic Man podcast with your host here, Daniel White, where we want to have a platform where we help guys become men they can be proud of, who attract women that they're proud to be with. And one of those men is in our company today, Mr. Ege Reynolds, a dating coach that helps and specializes specifically with analytical men to help them improve their confidence and have the type of dating life they want. I've been following Ege's content for a while, and I really like the authenticity and integrity he brings into a space that can often be filled with a lot of toxicity, a lot of negative mindsets. But I believe he's one of the shining lights in the community at the moment. And I'm keen to hear more about his journey, how he got to the place where he is. And you're going to get some valuable mindsets, some takeaways, and be able to chart your own journey through learning from other people, like in today's episode. So awesome to have you here, Ege.
Daniel, thanks for having me on, and I feel honored to be here because even before my own journey, before I started my coaching business, you're one of the people that I followed. So it feels very warm to be here and to have this conversation together.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I really appreciate that as well. In terms of the introduction, obviously we're going to kind of unpack your journey and your story a lot more. But if you just want to give a little bit of an overview in terms of like where you're at now and what are you doing? Obviously, I know you help analytical men in their dating lives. If you just want to unpack that a little bit, and then we'll jump into things.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Ege, as you mentioned. And basically what I do is I help analytical men in their dating life using three things. The first part is the right set of principles. So we use principles of relaxation, expression, empathy, and leadership to guide men. And the way I look at it is instead of having the strategy or the path, it's like giving people a compass on you may not know exactly where to go, but you know the right direction to head towards. And we combine that with, I used to be a computer science student, with the data and the technology to track what are the right actions this person needs to take to grow, along with heart-based leadership, where we work with people based on the heart. So the leadership comes from not like, come on, bro, just go do this, but it's coming from a place of encouragement while still pushing people outside of their comfort zone. And we found that to work quite well, especially with analytical men, because I know, Daniel, your teachings as well is very much based on energy. And sometimes it can be challenging to tell someone who's so stuck in their head, hey, man, pay attention to how relaxed you are, how warm you are. So we found that combination to work really well.
Yeah, awesome, man. I love that heart-based leadership. I'm a big fan. I got my little, I don't know if you've heard of the Institute of Heart Math. They basically teach you how to get in coherence with your heart. It's like this little wired device that you can plug into your phone, and it actually helps you sync up with heart-brain coherence, and get your heart and your brain actually in alignment. So I love the sound of what you're doing there. Let's rewind a little bit. You're doing some amazing stuff right now, helping a lot of men in the space. But let's rewind a little bit to the start of your journey, okay? Because I know you weren't always as cool and as handsome as you look now. Take me back to high school, Ege. Take me back to childhood, Ege. What did that kind of look like? What kind of environment did you grow up in? How would you describe yourself during that phase of your life?
Right. That's a great question. And when I was growing up, I was a very happy kid, especially the early years. So until I was like 7, I had a very happy life. I loved to eat, so I was a bit chubby, which over time, as we'll see at some point, it got a bit worse. But when I was 7, my parents split up, and I was at the age of kind of understanding what was going on, but not old enough to understand why my parents were no longer together. And then within that year, my mom met someone else and they got married. So we started living, my mom, my sister, and then my stepdad. And it was a very interesting way to grow up looking back, because my dad was more the nice guy who was always there for people, even when it was not in his best interest. Whereas my stepdad was the opposite end of the spectrum. He was super stoic, didn't show much emotion, didn't really talk to you that much. So in some sense, I had not only one but two unhealthy archetypes of the masculine, which is like the nice guy and then the stoic, right? But that environment allowed me to kind of see the positives in both while understanding the cons in both as well. Now, when my parents split up and I started living with my mom and my stepdad, I started playing a lot of video games. Growing up, I had two things I loved, or I guess three things. One of them was food, second one was basketball, and third one was video games. And being an introvert, some people like to do some drugs, some people like to drink, and for me, my escape was the video game. So I played a lot of Call of Duty, I played a ton of League of Legends, and even when I played, I was very competitive. So I wouldn't just play to play, I would play to get better. But I had a very intense personality around that, not realizing that was my escape. So through that childhood, I learned how to be very antisocial. And I was the kid who would show up to class, do very well in math, do very well in physics. I would study, but I didn't have to study that much. But when it came to connecting with people, I was that kid in class who was liked by people, but never considered like as a serious option. And one thing, since I grew up in Turkey, is like there's a lot of friendliness to the Middle Eastern culture. However, there's not as much of a sensualness. Like women and men are quite separated. You're friends, but no one really understands the romantic side of things until you get a lot older. So I never really knew how to speak to women. And being the kid who was overweight, I didn't feel like I deserved women, which then set that precedent for that transformation to happen. Because I've seen, with myself and knowing a bit about your journey, it's usually the people who struggle the most who have the most crazy transformation, because that pain becomes your fuel in the beginning. And that was the case for me.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So many cool things that you mentioned there. One of my favorite mentors, Dr. John DeMartini, he would say, "Your voids create your values." And sometimes people
Right.
might see that in a negative way. They're like, "Oh, you're poor, so now you're trying to make money to like fill this hole." But there's normally like almost lessons for your soul in that. If you grew up and you were not good
Mhm.
with women, and now you feel a call to go on that journey, it's not just because you codependent and all that stuff. Like, who knows, maybe it is that, and
Right.
that's going to be part of your healing journey. But there's a lot of nourishment, there's a lot of lessons, there's a lot of gifts in terms of following that calling that you saw as a lack in your life early growing on. So you obviously
Mhm.
mentioned your parents' divorce. um we'll go into the eating thing, because obviously it sounds like that was something that was really important to you. But how
Mhm.
did this kind of play out in terms of your own self-esteem and the way you saw yourself? You obviously said you're a smart, intelligent boy. You're probably
Mhm.
doing well in class, not so social though. And then you love your eating. Like, well, how do you kind of see yourself at this point of your life? You're like, hey, I'm pretty cool. Or you're like, wow, I feel very different. Like, how do you view yourself at this point during this era?
Yeah, when my parents split up, it was quite confusing. And since I was just 7 years old, I had this feeling that I did something wrong and that led to them splitting up, which, looking back wasn't really the case. But I think as a kid, there's a tendency to take things personally. And the funny thing was, I was relatively decent at making friends when it came to class, because in Turkey, academics are very important. And sure, you might be a nerd, but people want to get good grades. So they want to be friends with the nerds so that they can get help in their homework and understand what's going on. It's a very academics focused culture. But at the same time, I was never the guy who was considered like handsome or attractive. Oh, I have a crush on Ege. That was not something that happened at all. So it was interesting being the guy who had a friendly level of attention from everyone without almost having that romantic interest from women. And I think that over the years made me believe, okay, I'm the guy who can be friends with people, who's very warm, but for some reason, they're never considering me as that romantic option.
Yeah, I hear you there. And I also relate to that a lot. You know, like some people in their journey, they were like getting stuff thrown at them and people hated them and like they were just the
Mhm.
complete weirdo. Um, like that obviously must be really tough as well. But I think I was similar to you where it's like, hey, I could make friends. I was around people, but it was always just kind of like the friendly guy on the side, you know, like my
Exactly.
friends would be getting all the girls. I'd be like, wow, like that looks really cool and stuff. So
Right.
I was around that environment, but just like not allowed to like delve in and enjoy it. You're almost like watching in from the sidelines. A quick one
Mhm.
on the parents' divorce, because again, that's something that's similar to me. My parents got divorced, I think, when I was about 4 years old, so a little bit
Uh,
younger than you. But yeah, kids do have this thing. I'm forgetting the term here. It's not confirmation bias; it's something else. But it's like they have a reality where they can't discern, like, okay, well, this is happening because of X, Y, Z reason. They almost
right.
have this idea of looking at the world like, I am the cause of everything. Everything is
Mhm.
because of me. So in a case where your parents get divorced, you're not like, well, they're two individuals and they have
Yeah.
different things. You're like, oh, it's like my fault. And I'm curious what your journey and how you look at it now, because I remember growing up at the time, people would always ask me, like as I was growing up, like, hey, your parents got divorced, like, are you okay? And maybe it
Mhm.
was like a trauma thing, but I almost like blocked it out. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And it's not that I thought I wasn't fine. I'm just like, no, I'm fine. It's all good. It's literally only in the last few years, like when I've done different personal development programs and like looking back at how my view of reality came about, that I'm like, I think there are some things there, you know, like
Right.
things around unworthiness, not being allowed to feel certain levels of joy in my life now. And I trace that back to, wow, I think it did have an impact when my parents did get divorced. I put that on myself, like, I'm
Mhm.
bad, I'm unworthy, I'm not worthy of love. Look, I messed it up. It was all because of me. And then it's like later in life when success can come to you in different forms, it's like you aren't really able to enjoy that. Well, that's been my
Mhm.
experience. How have you kind of seen it and look back on it and healed from that divorce at a young age?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's very
Mm.
interesting how you mentioned that made you unable to feel some levels of joy. I think for me, maybe because I was a bit older compared to
Mm-hmm.
where you were,
Mm-hmm.
the mechanism was more around the idea of thinking like, oh, I made a mistake. So it wasn't as
Mm-hmm.
core as like, oh, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I messed something up and this is why this happened. And interestingly enough, I think my coping mechanism became being the joyful person to be strong for my mom, because it's like when my parents split up, my my mom didn't have a man in her life for a while until she met my stepdad, but even then it was a pretty disconnected relationship for them. So growing up with a little sister, later on like two sisters, I was always the person who was looked up to, and I had this need to be strong for people, because if people were struggling but I was happy, I could at least bring that joy to them. And I think that that manifests in me in a reverse way, where I realized in the past few years I have a difficult time being okay with negative emotion like disappointment or anger or jealousy. And it's much easier for me to crack a joke, do some banter, play around, have fun with people than it is to admit, like, oh, my girlfriend did this and that makes me feel jealous. So I had a different layer of that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's cool because it branches off almost in two directions where, like you said, the more positive side of it is like, hey, you want to
Right.
brighten people's life. You know, people are going through some hard times. How can I add a little bit of joy? How can I add some positivity to their lives? But sometimes when you become too ingrained in this pattern, this is something I've been fascinated by recently, and I'm talking about it more and more in my teaching, is like, that can become the archetype of the nice guy, where he's like always just got this
Yeah.
happy front and everything's all good. And he hasn't found that balance of like also saying like no and like fuck off and like don't do that from
Mhm.
a loving place, but being able to be strong and firm. And again, that's something that I battle with a lot. So it's interesting that divorce,
Mhm.
you almost took responsibility for the people around you, but obviously there can be negative consequences to that as well, where it's like overly nice and friendly and everything's always
Right.
good. Then it can become hard to like state boundaries, or even just admit when you're upset and be vulnerable with negative emotions. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when I was around, I think 4 or 5, I asked my mom, "What does my name mean?" And she told me in Turkish it actually means protector of the world. And I remember going like, "Mom, that's a lot of responsibility. I don't know if I'm ready for that." And looking back, of course, there's that negative side of being a nice guy. But I think on the plus side, now having built that confidence and healed a lot of the shadows, it makes you a very expansive person in a quiet way. Because it's like the more you care about people, you can own your care and then you can be very dominant with that. And then you can kind of set boundaries or be straight up with people, not because you want something necessarily for yourself, but you have a care that comes from within you first for yourself, but also for the people around you. And I think that's why I eventually found my niche working with guys with good hearts who had an analytical mind, because I think there's a lot of positives in that nice guy archetype as well. When that care is directed in the right way, where someone can feel love for the people that they're meeting, the woman they're meeting, that's very powerful because women all want to feel special. And I think compared to a guy who's more stoic, who's more cold, there's a lot of power in that. But of course, it comes with the caveat of being able to set those boundaries when necessary and making sure before that love flows outwards, it also hits you and it comes through you and it starts from that self love. So I think that's something that created a lot of struggle early on. But looking back, it's something that I'm very grateful for, that I do have that care and playfulness within my personality.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it's a big strength as well. In all these archetypes, there's positive connotations, Like
Right.
sometimes when I talk about like a nice guy, guys are like, "What are you saying? Like, do you need to be an asshole?" And I'm like, "That's not what I'm really referring to when I'm talking about a nice guy. It's more like guys who are inauthentic, they're being
Yeah.
fake. They're just trying to be a friend to a woman where they really want to be something more." That's the negative side of the nice guy. He needs to grow a pair, own his desires a little bit more so he can become whole. But it is really interesting because I've obviously come more from that route. I interviewed
Mm,
one of my friends on this podcast, the first episode, and this guy used to crush it with women,
mm,
overall good guy, but you could say like a little bit more of an asshole. That's just how he came across. But to me, he was very authentic. And it was funny listening to his journey now because he's engaged now
mm,
to the woman he's with, and it's almost like he's had to now learn all the empathy stuff because before he was
right.
kind of very much in himself and went after what he wanted. And again, all great traits in that, but he was lacking the empathy side where the nice guy almost has that empathetic, loving side to him. But if that's not balanced out with some of the positive archetypes of the warrior or the stoic or something, then he can easily
Mhm,
become a doormat that women don't really take seriously. So I like the idea and the conversation of like becoming integrated, becoming whole, becoming
right.
well balanced. You're not on either end of the extreme, and that allows you to actually be effective, not just with women, but in all areas of your life, which I think is something that's really being called in for men at the moment.
Definitely.
Mm.
Definitely, man. And I think, in a way, being that integrated man is really what intrigues women. It's
Mm.
not like being the bad boy or, wearing a leather jacket that's black or getting a face tattoo. It's none of that stuff. but it's having multiple facets to who you are so that you can be the guy who does a boxing class while going on a meditation retreat, while spending 10 days in a dark room, which you did, which I think is crazy. Because I think when you're that person who can't be fit into a box, that becomes very intriguing for people. And I think a lot of nice guys kind of take what the bad boy has to offer on a surface level, and then when their transformation happens in a way that's driven by the shadows, they almost like get clinging to being the bad boy now, and then they end up pushing away women that they might have loved to have a relationship with. And I think that's like the dark side of the coin as well. It's something to be very careful about.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely talk about some dark sides of the dating coin because I'm sure we've both experienced some of those on our journey. But going back to you and your journey, so it's like, cool, I can make friends. I'm kind of the friendly, smart guy in the school. Start talking to me about some of your first kind of interactions with women, like the first time you started liking girls. Did you ever used to
Right.
ask girls out? Like, what were some of those first significant memories or moments when you like started in puberty and you start getting interested in women?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did the classic nice guy strategy of being friends and hoping one day she would realize that, hey, I always cry on this guy's shoulder. Maybe I should date him sometime. And clearly that didn't work. But I remember one of the first moments in my life was in sixth grade, which is first year of middle school in Turkey. There was this girl on my school bus. And for 5 years, we were in the same school bus and we were friends, right? And for 5 years, I was like, tomorrow I'm going to tell her. Tomorrow I'm going to tell her. And then one day, this is crazy, right? One day, one of my friends, one of my guy friends comes to our school bus. We used to sit together, hang out. And this guy has a dream about this girl's best friend, a dream that they are together. And he has the incredible idea to go tell one of her other friends that he likes this girl and I like her friend. And I'm like, please do not do that. Like, that's stupid. Don't do that because she's going to tell them, right? And this guy, of course, with his hormones just running crazy on one of the breaks, goes up to this girl and tells her everything. And I'm so embarrassed that she knows that I'm interested in her. This was a Friday. And in our school, like your phones are taken away during the day. So I know at the end of the day, I'm going to get my phone. And I have a friend in my class who I'm very close friends with. And I'm like, dude, I cannot go to my school bus today. Like, I'm going to need to come over. We play some FIFA, some NBA 2K, order a pizza. It's on me, but I cannot go home today. Like, there's no way I'm going back to the school bus and facing that situation. I was that embarrassed that a woman that I was interested in knew that I was interested in her. So thankfully, my friend helped me out in that situation. And I didn't go back to my bus that Friday. And Monday morning, I just acted like never happened. Like she didn't know, I didn't know. And we just moved on like that for years. To this day, of course, I know that she knows and she probably knows that I was interested in her, but we never talked about it because I was that scared to show my intentions with women. Um, and it's embarrassing looking back, but in a way also it's showing like the impact of a transformation like this, how you can go from not being able to even face a situation like this to being able to compliment women you're interested in, build the relationships you want. So that was the first woman in my life that I remember.
Yeah, man. And obviously, where you are today, you can see the transformation that's taken place. But you actually highlighted two of the key aspects of the nice guy archetype there. And I relate to them 100%. Number one, he lives in the eternal hope strategy. So he's like, okay, well, like I remember I would hang out with like girls that were my friends, not my
Right.
girlfriends, and like their boyfriends, like we're like 16 years old or whatever, maybe they like cheated on them, like just kissed another girl or something like that. These girls would be like all upset and like, he's such an ass and stuff like that. And again, I'm the one, they're there like telling me about what like an idiot he is. And in my mind, it's like, okay, I'm doing a different strategy. I'm listening to her. She's saying she doesn't like it when her boyfriend does that. So I'm just going to be the super nice guy just hanging out here. And one day it's going to pay off. Like it hasn't paid off
Exactly.
yet. Then it had been 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It still hadn't paid off. But the nice guy lives in the eternal hope strategy that one day my ships are going to come in. And you only have to go down that route for so long until you say, maybe this isn't the way that I'm eventually going to start getting attraction from women and sexual interest from
Mhm.
women. So that's number one. Number two, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. It's almost like the second thing about the nice guys is ashamed of his desires, you know, whether it's a desire to make money, but especially around women, he's ashamed of his desire for sex. He's ashamed to go after what he wants. He's embarrassed about it. And obviously, you were quite a young guy at this age, but why do you think that is? Do you think it was like something to do with sexuality? Like it was wrong to like
Mhm.
a girl? Did you ever get the message like, hey, don't focus on women, focus on your schoolwork? That's a distraction. Because I hear a lot of guys talk about like that. Or where do you think that embarrassment or that shame around your desires were coming from? And did that carry on into the future in different ways as well?
Right. Yeah, I think partially it was just the idea of, hey, focus on your schoolwork, get good grades. That's the priority. And the second part of it is like, if you know spiral dynamics, Turkey is a
Mm-hmm.
very blue stage country. So there's a lot of tradition, religion, and of course, we go to school like women and men together, and it's all good and we're friends. But it's kind of like one of my Indian friends said this as well. Apparently, in India's national anthem, they say all Indian men are your brothers and all Indian women are your sisters. And it's that kind of vibe. There's just no sexuality or sensuality mixed into the culture. And there's an awkward feeling from everyone around you about it. So people just have to figure it out as they get older. But like in Turkey, you don't have house parties. You know, you barely drink sometimes. And if you go late to the movies, like if you go to the 8 p.m. movie screening, that's like, oh, wow, you're really defying your parents, you know? So I think partially the culture and partially just the way I grew up and not having a father to talk to about this stuff because my stepdad was emotionally distant, so I couldn't open up to him. And then my dad, I only saw like once a week, and I didn't have someone to talk to about this, and I wasn't going to talk to my mom about it. So I think it was more the cluelessness around how to do it because I was very used to knowing what to do in class. Like I was very used to being the smart person who could figure out a math or physics problem. So when I came to an environment where I felt clueless, I just didn't want to do that to not risk that failure.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd been so used to the identity of I'm the guy who knows things, I'm the guy who
Right.
figures things out. I don't want to look like the idiot in this situation. And it's interesting because that seems like a pattern with a lot of these intelligent men. You obviously work with a lot of them. I've worked with
Mm.
quite a few of them, guys who are architects, scientists, like all like way more intelligent than I am. But it's almost like they just double down on that root of intelligence, 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 where I call it
For
almost
sure.
like intellectual intelligence. But then when it came to like social intelligence or emotional intelligence, they actually can be very underdeveloped in those areas because they're very strong in the other area. It's interesting you
Yeah.
spoke about the idea of the lack of a masculine role model in your life. You
Mhm.
obviously, that for most men, hopefully that would be their fathers. But I see like the epidemic of our time is obviously the family unit, I think, is being dissolved a lot. So like you see women becoming hyper masculine, and then you see men becoming very feminine. And
Mhm.
I think one of the things that even me and you to some extent are being pulled into is like, okay, cool. How do we redirect men and be healthy role models of masculinity, and that might come out in different forms, but I see men crying out for that. And if
Yeah.
you don't have those, you can go down some negative dark routes, you know, like the classic example is of the men in the inner cities who don't have a good male role model figure, then they join a
Hmm.
gang. You know, it's like we have this
Hmm.
calling inside of us, like, I want to find mentorship, I want to trust a man, I want to follow a man. But if we don't have any good role models of that, well, we'll jump into anything. And even in my journey with the dating stuff, it's like when I was in pain, when I was battling, it's like when someone reached out a hand, I wasn't like, well, is this guy authentic and like full of
Right.
integrity? I'm like, dude, I'm suffering, I'm dying here. Like, I don't care what you say. If you can help me, like, that's who I'm going to go with. And that was obviously like a
Hmm.
lot of the pickup artist stuff, which there is a lot of missing integrity and a lot of missing authenticity. But because, at least at that stage, I didn't
Hmm.
see any other options, it's like, that's what I'm going to go for. So, yeah, really, one of the reasons I resonate with your work, and I see you being that positive masculine role model, and I'm sure they'll continue to develop, because I think men need that at this stage. There's a lot of
Yeah.
little boys running around in men's bodies. You could be 30, 40, 50 years old, but your psychology is that little boy, like, what are people going to think of me if I go up and talk to that girl in the cafe? It's
Um,
like, is that the psychology of a man? You know, no, it's not. And if you're there, cool, like, not shaming you for it, but like, hey, you're being called to step up, you know, to own what you want and go after what you want.
yeah, definitely, man. And I think that's why I love helping men with dating, really, is I think an attractive woman mirrors your insecurities like nothing else.
Mhm.
And for guys who haven't built the skill to go up and speak to that woman, it can be such a healing experience to accept the fact that you feel like shitting in your pants right now, yet you will drag your feet and go up to this girl and say something. And I think a lot of guys don't truly understand the meaning of that journey. So they have dating problems, but they try to fix it by like taking some good pictures, using some face app action, crafting some messages, using that perfect sexualization sequence, but that doesn't change who you are. And in the end, like we attract who we are, especially in a long-term relationship, is if you're living in fear, if you're terrified to speak your mind, to speak your truth, then with that insecure belief, you're going to attract women who are also insecure, and you're going to be stuck in games that you don't actually want to play. And that's why, as you said, I think part of the journey of people finding these masculine leaders and the leader within themselves is by following their own fears and being able to start a conversation with a woman in broad daylight with no drugs, no drinks, just you and your fears is such an admirable thing to do.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. And don't even get me started on the dating apps with the Photoshop pictures and all of that kind of
Crazy,
stuff,
man.
because to me that's everything that's wrong with masculinity. People say toxic masculinity is something that's been made up. Yes, do I think the media has kind of thrown that label on actual true aspects of masculinity? 100%. But I
Mm-hmm.
fully believe in toxic masculinity. To me, toxic masculinity is men hiding behind a fake front instead of doing the work. To me, it's
Mm-hmm.
guys using AI photo things, deep fakes to change
Right.
their bloody Tinder profiles. To me, that is toxic masculinity. And I love what you said, like, even for me and you, like, in the traditional sense, like, in some way, we very much value spirituality, like meditation. And I
Mm-hmm.
just went on a 10-day darkroom retreat, and I love going on silent retreats and doing all this deep inner work. I think that's so, so crucial. But I think some guys get lost down that road as well. You know, it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
just doing all this stuff, and they use it as an excuse. I think I saw you make a post about this recently, where
Yeah.
sometimes spirituality, when it meets the physical, that's where the real healing takes place. Not in your bedroom alone, sitting, meditating, thinking about it. Cool, that can be an aspect of it. But then when you're in that Starbucks cafe and you're sitting down there and you see that cute girl and you feel that authentic impulse come out, like, hey man, like go connect with her. And
Mhm.
oh no, but like that's so like try hard and like I'm just like that's so inauthentic and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, you're just full of crap. You know, you're absolutely
Exactly.
full of crap. And I see it almost as like the modern day man's initiation experience. If you look back in all
That's
these
right.
tribal cultures, like in the Maasai tribe in Africa, you have to go out there and literally like kill a lion when you're like 16 years old. You know, talk about fear. They're not sitting there meditating away. It's like, there's a fucking lion. Like, you got to go defend yourself against that thing, and that will help you grow up in certain ways. And there's lots of different traditions. So,
Right.
thankfully, we don't have to go kill a lion, but to me in the modern day era, like men don't have that. It's just like we grow up and we can just like without having to like face that crucible, without like
Mhm.
burning in the fire of some intimidating experience. That's where all these little boys and men's bodies come about. And to me, the dating journey, at least an aspect of it, is like it's an initiation from boyhood to manhood when done right and taught in the right way. Have you also seen it that way?
Dude, 100%. And in a way, we should be glad that we don't have to fight a lion. All we have
Yeah.
to do is to walk and speak to a woman we're interested in.
Yeah.
But 100%, like before I started approaching women, I was scared. I didn't really speak my mind with people. I told people what they wanted to hear and not necessarily what I thought. There was a lot of other areas of my life where I was very risk averse. Like I would think of the worst case scenario, what could happen, and wouldn't do something. And I remember like when I was starting my business, I had a business coach and he went, this was after like I've approached thousands of women and really put in the work. He was like, "Oh, Ege, by the way, if someone doesn't respond to your messenger conversation, like, don't worry, it's okay, rejection's fine." And I was like, "What rejection?" And he's like, they didn't respond to your conversation. They rejected your initiation. I was like, "That's not rejection. I went up to a table of 7 women and got completely embarrassed. That's maybe rejection. Someone not responding to me on Messenger is not rejection." And I think like a lot of the beliefs that actually made me successful in my business, in my life, came from that journey. Because it's like you're training really hard, you're going into intense social situations. And I don't know if you've done this, Daniel, and I'm sure you probably have. One of the first thing I did was like make a list of all the situations I was scared of and slowly checking those out. Girl on the phone, okay, I feel like she's going to ignore me. Okay, let's see what happens. Go with her friends, go with her family. And I think by doing that, you get to really see, wow, I'm in a prison of my own mind. All these assumptions I make about reality are just not true. And I think it's almost this experience of like a profound realization that, like, wait, what else do I believe to be true that's limiting me right now is actually not true. And I think being able to meet women in that way, that's why it has such a carryover effect. And guys who stick to that journey, they end up quitting their job and starting a business. They end up asking for that promotion. They end up like one of my clients did a bodybuilding competition recently because he had the confidence that he would do it. And as you say, like, that's why this is such a strong initiation. When you do this, everything else other people deem difficult in life feels a lot easier. Yet, in a funny way, society in some ways tries to shame men because they want to go speak to a woman. Whereas when you get rid of that conditioning, there's so much value in it. No one's trying to shame anyone for going to the gym because they think they're overweight. Yet for a guy who's socially anxious, they get shamed for trying to speak to women. And I think the more we can see the deeper meaning behind it, the easier it will be for men who might get sucked into that narrative of like, oh, maybe I'm bothering her. Oh, maybe she doesn't want to talk to me. If you can connect to your deeper meaning on why you're doing this and your own intention, it becomes a lot easier to do. So I agree with what you said.
Yeah, you brought up some awesome points there. Number one, I think that this journey has multi-dimensional benefits. So, like, on one
Right.
way, you're teaching on the surface level social skills, like how to go up and start a conversation with someone and make a good impression and express yourself, all these types of things. But it doesn't just stay isolated to your social life or your dating life. It starts to overflow into your work life and the way you carry yourself and what you believe is possible for you. And you can go on the most incredible transformations. I think we're probably examples of that. When I started getting
Mhm.
better with the dating, all of a sudden when I was working my 9 to 5, I would like step in with a little bit more leadership, because I'd
That's
met a
right.
girl on the weekend and I'd be like, she could see I was a little bit hesitant. I'm like, hey, really go for what I want. Like, hey, come, let's go grab a drink at my place. And with that assertiveness that I'd built in a social setting, now in the workplace, I'm like, I think the same thing applies. And I'd be a little bit of assertive
Yeah.
with an idea I have I want to share with my boss. And all of a sudden he's falling in line. And now I'm getting promotions coming my way. So there's so many benefits. And that's why it can be scary. If it was easy, every random guy would be doing this. But if you're listening
Right.
to a conversation like this, there's probably something inside of you that's being called forth onto this journey, because there are so many benefits for you. And just like you said, to me, it's like the big domino. It's like it's the
Mhm.
exact same thing happened to me in business. Like if a guy on a sales call is like, hey, I'm not interested, I'm like, okay, cool, no worries. I'm like, I've been rejected by hundreds of like gorgeous
Exactly, man.
women. You think some random guy on the internet is gonna like phase me with that? Almost in a healthy way, it gives you a thick skin, not in this protective way where you can't feel and
Mhm.
you block out things, but you're like, hey, I know if I want to do something meaningful with my life, not everyone's going to agree with it. Not everyone's going to buy into my vision. And that's okay as well. It doesn't mean that there's anything inherently bad about me. So that's why I'm so passionate about
Yeah,
helping guys on this dating journey and supporting coaches like yourself and other guys, because I don't even care if someone works with me. Go work with someone else, but
for
go
sure,
do the
man.
work. Like something in your soul is calling you forward to go in on this journey, because there's so many incredible gifts waiting for that. So tying it back to a little bit of your journey, and I want to talk about, if anyone's watching on YouTube right now, you see Ege, he's looking fucking smart, he's looking prim, look at him in his denim jacket there, he's looking like $1,000,000. But for some people who aren't familiar with your journey, you didn't always look
Mhm.
as attractive as you did today. And I'm going to share my screen in a second. But you've obviously mentioned already you really used to like
Mhm.
food. And that obviously got to a point where you became really overweight. So maybe talk a little bit about that. And I'll show the picture on the screen
Right.
as you are talking. If you guys are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you're going to kind of miss this. I'll describe it. But why do you think it got to such a big extent? Was it purely just you love food, or do you think in some way you were suppressing some feelings and the food helped you with that? So
Mhm.
yeah, just talk a little bit about your experience with obviously gaining a lot of weight, and then we'll talk about how you got out of that as well, just as I share my screen here.
Yeah, I think first of all, Turkish food is incredible. Like Daniel, if I'm ever close by and you want to
Yeah,
visit Turkey, like I
yeah,
got you, bro. And you'll
nice.
see for yourself how good the food is. I brought a
Yeah,
few friends from different countries and they
mm,
all gained a few pounds. And I told them,
nice,
this is the right way to visit Turkey. You just eat.
nice.
So that's the first part. Second part, as you see in the picture, like 100%, my way of avoiding emotions was eating. If I was sad, another cookie. If I was angry, oh man, the ice cream in the fridge looks absolutely delicious. And the way this happened was I was eating a lot, but I also played basketball. So for a long time, I was chubby. I was the second slowest person in our team, but I was still fast enough to be in the basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened was I was a bench warmer and there was some inside politics with the team. Basically, guys who didn't come to training started playing, and I didn't like that. So I left the team. But I kept eating the same amount of food and switched up my hobby of basketball with playing League of Legends. You add a couple of years to that, and we come to this picture. And
How
um,
old are you in this picture about?
I think I was 17 years old.
So this is like towards the end of high school.
Yeah, this was so the summer before my senior year of high school was when I started on the weight loss journey. So this picture was actually that's my sister, my sister's graduation. So this
I was
must
about
be,
to say, I was like, that girl's pretty cute there, but let's just carry on with your call. I'm like, you were still hanging with some cute girls, even though you were overweight, but no, carry on
yeah,
with your story.
exactly. This
Yeah.
is my sister. So that was the only girl who came close to me at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was around June before my senior year of college.
Okay. So obviously, like you say, you stop working out, you start getting more into video games. Is obviously not a very good combination. It's coming from
Right.
not being able to feel the emotions, whether that's sadness or anger or any of these things. When
Mhm.
was the moment that things changed for you with the health journey? You know, you're obviously in great shape now. I've seen videos of you boxing and all these types of things. Like,
Mhm.
because there's obviously a lot of people who deal with weight issues, and it's like they obviously know, like, okay, I probably shouldn't be this overweight, but knowing it's one thing, going on the journey to actually changing it and actually walking through it, it's very difficult. Like, not a lot of people are able to do it. So what was that turning point moment for you, and then how did that kind of unfold? Like, did you just go at it and change everything? Was it a bit of a stop start?
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think in a weird sense, although I was fat, I was confident in my ability to stick to stuff. Like when I started playing League of Legends, I started in the worst league possible, which for anyone who played, it's bronze 5. And then I got to top 0.01% of players, which is like around platinum 1 ranking, I believe. I may be wrong in the exact percentage, but I did things that I did very intensely. Same with approaching. So what happened with the weight loss journey was me and my family came back from a trip in the river for Europe for like a week and a half. And in that trip, they had all you can eat buffet in the boat that we were in. And of course, as a tourist, you want to try the local food. So I come back from that trip, I step on the scale, and I just saw 101 kilograms. In Turkey, we use kilograms.
Me
And that
too.
was the first time in my life, where I saw 3 digits in kilograms. And it just hit me in that moment. I looked down and I was like, something is terribly wrong and this has to change. And the moment that clicked, I remember I walked down. I asked my mom, hey, I want to sign up for the gym. Of course, I'm a kid, so I can't pay, but can you pay for the gym? My mom was a bit stingy on that front. So she's like, no, work out in the home. But the good thing about having divorced parents is if one of them says no, you always ask the other one because usually they like to compete a little bit. So they might say yes. So I went to my dad, I signed up to the gym, and my grandma is a doctor, so she found a dietitian and I went to the dietitian. And for the next 3 months, whatever workout my trainer gave me, I did exactly that. Whatever meal the dietitian gave me, I did exactly that. And I remember in 3 months, I lost, I think, 15 kilograms. And I stepped back into the dietitian's office to do a checkup, and she saw me and she's like, whoa, what did you do? And I looked at her and I was like, I just did what you told me to do. Does not everyone do that? Because I thought, like, this person gave me this, I'm going to take it seriously, I'm going to make it happen. And that was the beginning of the weight loss journey. So through that year, I lost around 65 pounds, which I think's maybe 30 kilograms or so, if I'm calculating that right. And of course, converted some of that fat into more muscle. So it was a body recomp. And the value in that journey was I saw how differently people treated me. And it made me see firsthand, like, okay, never judge anyone for how they look and treat everyone the same, which was a lesson I carried over to meeting women as well. Like a lot of guys see a maybe overweight woman or see a woman they're interested in versus someone they're not. and the way they treat these women is very different. And I think if you can treat them the same while owning your interests in the ones that you like, that makes you very grounded, because now, like, your personality is not shaped by what you crave and what you want, and it's coming from a very authentic place. So I'm very grateful I went through that, and it gave me a lot of perspective. And it was the first time in my life where I realized my input would change the output in my life. Because until that time, I thought, hey, I'm just fat, slow metabolism. This is just how it is. But I realized if I change something, then my life changes. And that realization stuck with me. So over that, I was able to see, like, if I don't like my life, it's on me to change it, which is a belief that served me really well.
Yeah, man, that's incredibly powerful. I've obviously met a lot of guys, and myself have been on this dating journey from sucking with women to getting good with
Mm-hmm.
women. And there's like a lot of gifts and lessons in there. But I haven't actually seen that many people have gone from like really overweight to then getting in great shape and then going on this journey, which that probably has gifts in and of itself, that just like you said, that empathy, that non-judgment. I want to touch on something before, which I think is such a crucial key. Everyone's always about like, how do I be a good leader? Women want me to be a leader, and I need to lead the interaction and all these types of stuff. But to me, leadership, this was something a recent mentor taught me. It actually comes from being a good follower. Like if you look at things in almost a hierarchical way, which sometimes spiritual people might be averse to, it's like, no, we're all equal and stuff like that. Then I say, go talk to that pretty girl. And he's like, no. I'm like, but I thought we were all equal. If that was really your belief, why are you freaking out about that girl? Do you really see her as an equal to you? No. So anyway, just to understand it from a leadership followership perspective, it's like, you displayed the traits of an amazing follower. It's like, I went to the gym, I spoke to this person, the dietitian told me this, and I just did it. Where I see a lot of guys struggling with this, even if they learn and they get into some coaching, it's like they're so resistant to being a good follower. Their ego's on the
Yeah.
line. They don't want to be like, oh no, I need help. So they could even pay you a couple $1,000s. Then they get in there and you say, hey man, I think this is what's really going to serve you. And they're like, yeah, but like, this is what like I think. And it's like, hey man, if you don't want to be a good follower, like you're not going to get the benefits out of the journey. So when you describe that with the health and the dietitian, I'm like, no wonder you had such an amazing transformation with women. No wonder you're building an incredible business, because when you can have that followership, like, wow, I'm learning from a mentor, not to give all my power away from them, but be able to serve from a place of followership. That becomes the template for great leadership. And why I think so many men are suffering in terms of their leadership, because I think they're lousy followers. They think followership is bad. They're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
inferior, so there's something wrong with me. I've got to show everyone how cool I am. But it has nothing to do with that. It's about being humble. It's about saying, hey, there's some things I want to learn that I haven't quite figured out, and this person has. How can I humble myself to learn from them? And that was something I did on my journey. I wasn't coming in there with my ideas of what I thought cool. I was like, cool, I don't know what's going on here. Like, teach me, and I'm just going to
Right.
do exactly what you say. But for some men, it's so difficult for them to do that. I don't know if it's an ego thing or whatever it is, but yeah, I love that trait of followership. And it doesn't just serve you with your health and your diet and your dating life and your business. It serves you in every area, because it's like one of the keys to growth. It's like understanding mentorship, how to be a great student, how to be a great follower. And you could learn all the attraction techniques in the world, but if you don't have some of those like basic ways of viewing the journey, it's going to cause a lot of suffering for you, and you're going to battle a lot along the way.
Dude, that's so well said. And that's so true. Like, I love that you mentioned it was the same for you, because for a long time I thought that's what everyone does. It wasn't
Yeah,
until
it was obvious.
I started coaching and
Yeah.
I was confused, like, wait, you just paid me a few $1,000s and now you're here to argue with the advice while clearly you have no expertise in this area? Wait, what? And that's when I started realizing a lot of people are more addicted to their ego of what they think they are then they want to change. Their desire to stay the same is actually higher than their desire to change, because they think, in a way, if they change, then they're no longer them. And I think what the way I saw it, and maybe this is the way you saw it as well, is actually having this leader increase my confidence in myself, because I went, okay, this person I did my research on, they're an expert. I think it's very important to do research on who you're working with. Like, pick the right coach. The wrong coach can definitely lead you astray. And I've heard a lot of horror stories, unfortunately. I'm sure you have as well. But once you've done your research and once you start working with someone, you can borrow their conviction and their results to feel more confident in yourself. So I think if you're a guy and you've never really dated the woman you want and you don't feel worthy of dating that woman, you can go to Daniel, you can go to me, and you can go, you know what? This process has worked for these people and they're going to teach me that process. And if it worked for them, I can borrow their confidence in this process that it's going to work for me too. Because they're a human, I'm a human, we're all the same. So why wouldn't it work for me? And that's why I was a good follower, was because I could look at the person I was learning from and borrow their transformation and the conviction that came from that, knowing that would lead me to where I wanted to go.
Yeah, man, that was so well said. I remember on my first like dating program that I signed up for was like a couple
Right.
of like thousand. It was in South African rands. It was like a couple thousand. It was like a couple of $100 US. But even for me at the time, it was like a huge investment. And I remember I got in there and the guy was like on a whiteboard, like writing stuff, and like I had my notebook and I was like writing every little thing down. And I was like looking at the other students like in the room, like dudes are like picking their toenails and like some guys like on his phone. I'm like, what the hell? Like I thought
Right.
we were here to learn. And like we would go out and I'd like when we got home, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning and we're all staying in the same house and like ask him questions like, what about this? Like what about that? And I was like taking notes. I was like, to me that was just so normal. And like you said, a lot of guys they don't do it. It's also the difference. I heard someone explain this really well, like the difference between curious and being committed. Like you can be curious, like, oh, read the Facebook post, or watch the
Mm,
YouTube red pill video. Wow, I'm very curious, and that could be an initial step, but don't get stuck there too long, because then there's the phase of commitment where it's like you said, you do your research, you find someone you resonate with, you like their stuff. When you get into their program, this is just a little bit of advice for anyone listening, whatever program this is, health,
mhm.
business, dating, whatever, once you get into that program, make it your goal to be the most committed student in there. Be the student that
Right.
outworks everyone. Because when I first started with my coach, like in the dating space, I was just like, cool, I'm just going to do everything he says. And there was a Facebook group and I'd like write these field reports and I wasn't doing it for any reason. But like 6 months later, he offered me a job. He's like, hey, I'm looking for some
Right.
assistance. I love the way that you've been showing up. Like, do you want to be a part of it? Like the opportunities that open up, and not even if you want to be a dating coach, but it's just like you get special privileges and like doors and opportunities open up for you versus like you join a program, you pay thousands of dollars, but you're still in the curious phase. It's like, wait, what does he have to say? Like, do I believe in that or not?
Yeah.
It's like, how does that? It's like, no, be committed to the journey, which I think is really important. I love the piece that you mentioned on the non-judgment towards women, having obviously been
Mm,
overweight yourself and then seeing a woman, because it is something that people don't talk about a lot, but it's almost like, to me, it's almost like a mirror. Like a guy will go out there and they'll often use the excuse like, oh, she's like not hot enough. Or like maybe the girl rejected him, like, oh, she was like a fat, ugly bitch. And I'm like, where's that coming from? Like, first
right.
of all, like, you're not in a position to be judging people. Like, you're not flipping the the integrated man that you can then pass judgment. And even if you were, you wouldn't pass judgment. The only people who
Mm,
kind of pass judgment like that are like, to me, it's almost a mirror. It's like they see themselves that way, and then they like it externalizes its judgment on other people, but they have that same critic in their own head. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that piece on the non-judgment, and even you could go up to a woman and like, cool, you could still interact with her in a respectful way, whether she was physically attractive or not. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that's such a cool point.
Yeah, I think a very good quote that explains that really well is from Zanperion, where he says, like, a man who loves woman is loved by woman. And I think because I grew up with two sisters and I was the oldest one, I always had care for women. Like, I couldn't talk to them. I was scared out of my life to speak and interact with them and show my desires. But I always, in a way, was very protective of them. And I don't know if that partially comes from my name or it's just how karma shaped up. But what I realized in the dating journey with that was that's a very powerful trait, being able to like really love the journey and love the woman you're meeting, not in like a nice guy head over heels infatuation type of way, but really being grateful for even a conversation. Because I think so many guys are just so stuck on the outcome. They care more about what the outcome represents about them than the actual woman they're talking to. I think when someone can tap into the energy of care, like you can really almost like imagine the thing you love the most and carry that energy outside as you're speaking to people, that's very powerful. And as you said, the guys who judge women the harshest also judge themselves. Like judgment is it's like a virus. And what they don't realize is like the moment they say that, they're actually going towards themselves. You're not good enough. You know, you're not fit enough. You're not attractive enough. You're not charismatic enough yet. Which is why I think it's just a smart thing to do to not judge women. It's not even like a feel good hippie type of advice. It's actually extremely useful for your progress to go, how can I actually love women? And I think that's also a very good test of someone's character, like how they can take a harsh rejection. And I'm sure, you know, you've had this. Anyone who's approached enough has had women who you approach who just looked at you as if you belonged in a trash can and you shouldn't be anywhere near her, and you're a low life that shouldn't even inhabit the same earth as she does, right? Can you actually in that moment be unreactive, take it for what it is and go, that's completely fine, and even laugh about it? So I think there's a big connection between having that love for people instead of judgment, and then being able to take things lightly. And that's why it's so powerful, because if you judge someone, you're almost giving that power away and saying, your opinion of me is very important, so I'm going to judge you so that I guard myself from your opinion. It's like, oh no, I didn't get fired, I left the job. Whereas we all know you got fired.
Yeah, it's kind of just owning it and owning that rejection instead of like an ego defense mechanism. It's like sometimes I heard a guy saying this to me recently. He's like, "Yeah, man,
Mm,
like I saw this girl in the parking lot, like after I was walking out of Whole Foods, and I really wanted to approach her, um, and but like, man, I was so scared, you know." And then I
right.
was like, yeah, man, but remember we had that conversation the other day where we saw that other guy where he went and approached a girl as she was getting into a car, and that was like very successful. You know, the girl loved that interaction. And he's like, yeah, man, but like I saw guys do that, and and that was pretty creepy. And I'm like, can you not see the connection there? It's like
Mm,
you can't approach women in the parking lot and you want to, but you also judge other men who do that as weird and creepy. It's like, no wonder you can't do it. But it's
right.
almost, I don't know if it's a lack of awareness or something like that, but it's like, hopefully like a coach can point that out to them. So I love that piece on judgment, because almost like whenever I met women, even if I got laid with them or not, I was always like, wow, that was so cool. I just met
Yeah.
Vanessa, the violinist from Ohio. Like, cool, nothing happened, but like, to me, meeting people was just interesting and fun. And it took me a while on my journey to figure this out, but it's like, when my results actually went super crazy, like with an amazing woman and like a lot of them, it's when I had that attitude of, like you said, care. Like, this is where I'll use
Mhm.
curiosity in a different way, but it's like it's almost like, yeah, whether we sleep together or not, I'm almost like assuming that's going to happen. But like, no, I'm genuinely curious about you, and I'm not pretending to be curious so that I can get laid.
Right.
I'm genuinely curious. Like, tell me about you. Like, I don't know, like, what are your hopes and your dreams and your fears and desires? And whether we slept together or not, I'm like, wow, there was such a rich conversation. There was such a rich interaction versus like, oh my God, like, please, like, okay, I got to ask her about her childhood because that's going to help her form a bond. And then I'm going to be able to get laid. I'm like, come on, man. Like, what's going on here? There's so much more to it than that. But it was cool to hear how you explained it. Like,
Mhm.
you also had this care and this curiosity towards women, because this leads into another point. It's like, I would say most men who try and improve their dating life, it's like, on one hand, it's like, I really want women. I'd love a woman that I can care about. I would love a woman that I can be intimate with and be sexual with and share deep conversations with and go traveling with.
Mhm.
It's like, one hand, I want all of this, but at the same time, I hate women for rejecting me all of these years. I have resentment towards women because they chose other men over me. I'm fearful of women that they might reject me and all of these types of things. So it's like, on one small hand, they're like, yes, I would love a girlfriend. And it's like, on another hand, they have so much like resentment and hate and bitterness towards women. It's like, no wonder women don't want to be around you. You know,
Right.
no wonder you can't successfully interact with women. If I hated you, I wouldn't even invited you on this podcast. Like, I hate Ege. He's a piece of shit. I think he's an idiot. I don't value anything he says. But yeah, I want to be his friend. It's like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. It's too many conflicting intents going on there. So how have you seen that play out? Like, guys who want to improve their dating life, but they also like kind of like bitter and resentful towards women, which in one way might be understandable. Maybe they have been rejected. Maybe they have gone through all this stuff. But to me, it also points out the importance of the emotional work that needs to be done. You need to be like clean in your own energy, so to speak, to have these
Mhm.
successful relationships with women.
Yeah. What you said so true. It's like when a guy has that belief, it's almost like one foot on the gas and the other foot
Mm-hmm.
on the brake, and you're
Mm-hmm.
putting in a lot of force into the process, but the growth itself is coming in very slow. And I think one of the ways in which a guy who might have those feelings can kind of let go of judgment is to really sit and meditate in a way where you're sending love to all women. Maybe like that attractive Instagram influencer that shut you down this morning and didn't even look your way. Maybe you're angry at her, but can you be loving towards women of any ages, an old lady that you saw walking by, you know, any woman that you're not even sexually interested in? So really visualizing women and feminine energy in general and sending love towards that, I think, is such a good practice to do. And if someone goes out and really like keeps that at the back of their mind, you'll actually see reality shift, and women will start responding very differently if you're doing it for the practice, but not with the intention to go like, oh, Ege told me to do this and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do this so that I will get woman. So the mind can play a lot of tricks in that way. But I think that's like, that's something you can experience for yourself when you sit in that energy for a long time. And that's why I love that you're also into spirituality, because a lot of these energies, they make no sense when you talk about them logically, especially you're very much up in your head. But you sit in the energy of like, I love woman, I love woman, I love woman, and you visualize yourself sending this love from your heart to all women. And you sit with that for 30 minutes and you go out with that energy and you do that for like a week, for 2 weeks, you'll see certain shifts. So it's not like we're telling stuff that's like just theory. This is direct experiences you can have. But I think a lot of guys are so caught up in what they want that taking 2 weeks to do something like this, they keep delaying those 2 weeks and going like, oh man, but what about the strategy on like building that story and like really sexualizing the conversation? Can you give me that? And they step over the things that will actually help them progress, which is this warmth and, as you said, the curiosity, because those two things are really what makes a woman feel special. And in the end, that's what leads to a connection for a woman who's also healed and who's also healthy. And the sad side of this is like a lot of the pickup industry is about artificially generating that and then sleeping with a woman, and it's like creating suffering on both sides, because then that woman becomes less trusting to men in the future when she meets men. So I think I love what you're doing in terms of the authenticity as well. I think that's why it's so powerful to have these conversations out there and show guys you can get what you want while being a really good person and improving on yourself, and you don't have to pick between your integrity and results with women.
I love that. That's so well said. I had to go down that journey myself to get a lot of success with women, but not have my integrity in place, to lose piece of my soul in it, to be like, this is not the route, you know?
Mhm.
And hopefully, yes, guys, like you said, don't have to choose between the two. I think that was so cool. I love the idea of the meditation. I also have something I do with clients. I actually got this, it was almost from like a money program that I was doing, where it was like redoing your inner game with money. And it would be this visualization where it's like, close your eyes, and it'll be like, imagine you're sitting in a cafe at a table and there's an empty chair across from you, and money walks into the cafe. And then it'll be like, how do you feel about it? You know, do you want to come close to it? Is it scary? Is it big? Is it dark? Like, what's going on? And it basically lets you know, like, a lot of people are like, oh, I really want money. But then it's like they have all these internal blockages towards it. And I just adapted it
Mhm.
to women. It's like, or it could even be sex. Like, sex walks into the room. How do you feel? What do you want to say to it? What does it want to say to you? And it could be like, hey, why have you not been interested in me for so long? You know, why have you been ashamed of me?
Mhm.
Why haven't you wanted to come close to me? So I think, like you said, that's such a huge idea. It's like healing your relationship to the feminine, not even just like with a hot woman, but just the feminine in general. Most men have such a wounded relationship to that, and no wonder women don't want to connect with them. So going back to your journey, like, how did you eventually come into the dating stuff? You've gone on this health journey, you've transformed in a massive way from being really overweight to getting into good shape. When did the stuff like, okay, now I need to start improving the dating life, the stuff with women, how did that come into the picture?
Yeah, so when I lost the weight, I had some interest senior year of high school from some woman. And then I went to college to the US. I went to school at UCLA for computer science. So I had this interesting experience where on surface I was pretty close to the guy I am today, physically, weight wise, maybe some less muscle at that time and a bit more skinny. However, in my mind, when I looked in the mirror, I still saw a fat kid. So when I tried to socialize with people, it was almost like, oh, I'm fat, unattractive. And I could still make friends. And like looking back, so many women were giving me signals. But because my reality was so clouded by my own negative beliefs that I didn't see it. So I started getting some results with women, but I was still the nice guy. And at that time, I'm 18, I'm in college, my parents are not there, so I download the dating apps. I'm like, let's see what this is about. And I met this girl who eventually became my girlfriend on Bumble, and we were in a 10-month or so relationship. It was the first girlfriend I had. And I realized at the end of that relationship, when things separated, like we had separate values, we had different sleep schedules, we were far away from each other. Like there was no reason for me to get into that apart from just neediness and wanting company and wanting this experience. Because since this was something I struggled with, it was also something I deeply wanted. So it's like I had this love for women and I deeply wanted to connect with them and I didn't know how to. But after that relationship, I was very heartbroken. And I promised to myself, I'm never going to let an application dictate who I can or cannot meet. And funny enough, around that time frame, for the first time, I saw on YouTube these YouTube prank guys like Angry Picnic, where like he goes up to the woman, and this is early days of those pranks. It's quite creative. And I remember watching that video knowing it's for entertainment, but thinking, wow, this guy's going up to strangers and these girls are like giving him a kiss on the cheek. Like, what? How can that happen? And as I was watching that, I came across James Tusk's rejection compilation, which is one of his best videos to this day. So YouTube algorithm was on my side. I click onto that, and that was the first time where I went, wow, there's actually a system, like there's a system to the madness. You can actually learn this stuff. And funny enough, my friend who I'd met at a networking event, he was going through a breakup. And I sent him this video, and turns out like he had done this thing from a company called Simple Pickup, which was like a long time ago, some online program. And we decided to go out together in Santa Monica. And just like the fitness journey, as you said, I went from curious to committed really fast. I realized this James guy can really help me. He's coming to Arizona. Hopped on a call with him. I was like, oh man, I'm in college. This is all money I have. But signed up for a boot camp with him. And he gave me a 10-week progression. I remember his email. He's like, here's your 10-week progression before boot camp. Let me know which week you're starting from. And I was like, I'm going to start from week 2. Already did a bit of this. And I have to tell you, like, before that, I had approached for a week. Like, I gave my first compliment. I was so scared. The girl was saying, thank you so much. And I ran away as she was saying that, like, physically ran away. I had so much nervous energy. But I realized in that week, like, if I'm going to do this on my own, this is really hard. But if I pay this guy like $2,000, all the money I saved up working part time, I'm going to have no option not to do it, because if I don't, I'll feel terrible about myself that I wasted that money. So I started that progression. By like week 9 and 10, I had the benefit of being at UCLA, which if you've ever visited LA or if you've been on campus, it's so easy to meet women. Like, it's full of just people. 50,000 students, big campus. I would go to class, have 10-minute breaks in between my classes, and be able to like have 2-3 conversations before my next class. So it's great for volume and meeting people. And at that time, I had so much pain that I didn't care if I was recognized on campus for it. I didn't care if women rejected me. I didn't care if other guys looked at me. I was like, I'm learning this for me. And that kept me very grounded. And by the time I got to James's boot camp, I was already seeing a few girls. And I remember meeting James, and he's like, yeah, Ege, so how's the progression? I'm like, yeah, it's been good. I did everything you said. I'm seeing a few goals right now. Things are moving a bit slow physically, but it's okay. It works. And his face was like, you did the progression? And I'm like, you told me to do the progression. What are you surprised about? And he's like, there's only one other person who did that before you came. And, he was my first introduction to this stuff. And just like you said with your mentor, right? He liked the fact that I put in the work. We stayed in touch. We traveled a bit together. And when I traveled to Colombia, I was hanging out with him and some other friends. And I had this experience of seeing a woman I wanted to speak to at the airport. But I was on 3 hours of sleep. And when you're 3 hours asleep, it's a bit more difficult to get yourself to do the things you want. But it's almost like in that moment when I saw her slowly walking away from my life, a light just flashed. And I went like, I need to go speak to her. So I go speak to her. And then we have like a 3-day romantic adventure. We were in Cartagena. You can go to an island for like $50. It was incredible. And I remember being on this hammock with this girl who 4 or 5 months ago I never would have seen myself with. And that was the moment I realized I want to coach this stuff. Because I was like, me from a few years ago who was fat, playing video games, like just going all in on food and League of Legends, would never believe the life that I'm living now. And that's what I want everyone to experience. So I was a bit too much in terms of like, every guy should experience this. I had a lot of clinging to that, but that's what drove me to be a coach.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's like you experienced that transformation for yourself. You proved to yourself it was possible. And to me, it's almost like a little bit of a don't know if this is the best way to phrase it, but a little bit of a rescue mission. You know, there's other guys out there that might be in a similar situation that I was. And if I put in the work and even help just one of those guys or a handful of them, like that can set their life on completely new trajectory, which is obviously what your life is on right now. So that's so cool how you got into it and how you evolved. And I love it. It's been a theme throughout our conversation today. It's like whether it was League of Legends or working on losing weight or the dating stuff, it's like you were committed in all of those journeys. You know, you didn't like half-ass it. You know, you went for it. And sometimes that's what guys need to get results. You know, if you're kind of always dabbling and like, yeah, I tried it for a week or two, it's like you don't achieve that escape velocity to actually like break through to that next level, which I think is so cool. So I'm curious, just because this is also something I would think about a lot. What have been some of like your mindset changes from when you first got into the dating journey compared to how you see it now? Like my mindset shifted on a lot of things. I think I would say things back in the day just to get a result. Like I don't care, like almost like a win at all costs type of thing. And maybe I wasn't valuing women as much along the journey. It was all about me. Where now I kind of see it hopefully from a more healthy, conscious, holistic perspective. But were there any things when you first got involved that you kind of just went along with, and now as you've grown, you kind of like, wait, I actually see it a little bit differently compared to that? I'm just curious how your mindset shifted within the dating space over your time in the journey.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely an aspect of integrity I lost touch with for a little bit, where it's like there's something that James had told me, which is like every time you sleep with a girl who has a boyfriend and she doesn't tell you, it's like your reality opens up, but at the same time, a part of your heart breaks. So I had a few experiences like that where like I was with a girl, and then I remember this one time, this girl that I met, this was just so stupid. This girl I met, she was like on a vacation with her cousin or niece, something, right? So, you know, I meet her, we start talking, things happen. We come out of this room, and her cousin's just like sitting on the couch. And her cousin goes, "Oh, by the way, this is my boyfriend, and he's also from the Middle East. He's from Lebanon or something." And then the girl that I was just with pulls up her phone, and she goes, "Oh, by the way, this is my boyfriend." And I laugh. I think she's joking, right? I'm like, "Oh, that's a super funny joke. Ha 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 ha." And she's like, "No, that's really my boyfriend." I'm like, "Oof, that sucks for him." And I think it's really easy, especially when you are deep into that journey, for this to become a game of one-upping each other, which I never got too caught up in. And that's why I loved spending time around James. Was like, he's a very relaxed guy. He takes it very lightly. He's all about giving it to everyone with instead of competing, which I'm so glad the YouTube algorithm suggested him and not anyone else, because just like you, I was so broken that even if it was a coach who was like ethically in the wrong, I might have gotten along with it. So I'm very grateful for that. But I think a mindset shift that happened for me was, I'm not going to trade my beliefs just to get results with women. At the beginning, there are definitely times that I twisted the truth a little bit. I said something that was kind of true, but exaggerated how much it meant. And it was all about like, oh, wow, this stuff is working. And it's really easy to get caught up in the excitement and not realize like, am I doing the right thing in this situation? So I think integrity was something I came back to, and really owning, like over time now, it became a lot more about assuming. I mean, I'm in a relationship right now, but more before then, assuming that my tribe is already out here. Instead of me trying to meet every woman and to have every conversation as long as I can and try to get on a date with every attractive woman I spoke to, it's more like, how can I own my world? And if a girl starts talking about catching up with the Kardashians, instead of pretending to be interested, actually own the fact that I don't care. in a compassionate way. It became a lot more about how can I express myself more freely while helping others do the same, compared to like how can I fit the right box to trigger this girl's right triggers to be or present myself as the guy she would want so that something will happen with her. And I'd say that's one of the core beliefs. I think the second part is also getting more into a relationship. Like, I don't know if you've had this, Daniel, but it's like when you see a lot in the dating journey, there's a part of your heart that breaks and you unconsciously build some like lack of trust with women because you've seen women trying to make out with you when you know they had a boyfriend at the club. You've seen maybe your friends, have some experiences with women, or you've had experiences with women yourself who were in relationships, and you just start kind of projecting that onto women you meet, forgetting that like just like there's guys with high integrity, there's women with high integrity. And that's why I'm so grateful with my girlfriend. Was like meeting her, I was able to see like, wow, she has such a high level of integrity. And recently I've been paying more attention to that and seeing reality for what it is versus that black and white thinking of like, oh, women are always so emotional, you can never trust them, they're going to go with their emotions. It's like, sure, women can be emotional if they're feminine, but they also know what's right and what's wrong. Just because they're emotional doesn't mean they don't know what truth is. So I think I moved towards a lot more healthier beliefs compared to where I was at in the middle of. It's almost like first part there was so much excitement that I was just excited and curious. Middle part you get a bit jaded. You're like, oh, I'm getting the results, but at what cost? And then now it's like, okay, that's the journey I went on. I'm going to focus on the positives and my ability to connect with people.
Yeah, man, I love that. I think I heard Jordan Peterson talk about that before, like the three stages. Like first you're like naive, like women are
Yeah.
just awesome and like I just buy them flowers and it's just gonna be amazing. And then you can go through like the cynical phase. Maybe you see behind the curtain in terms of different aspects of women's nature. And I think this is to me, it's almost a bit of a shame with the whole like red pill thing. Like everyone loves to kind of shit on the red pill dating community, but to me, there was like a lot of good, valuable information in there. Like it was a bit of a
Right.
shock to the system, but it's like you're playing a game. You'd rather have an accurate representation of like what are general patterns of this game versus like coming with your delusional, naive mindset. It's like women are just amazing and they're all nice. It's like some women aren't all nice, There
Yeah.
are aspects of a woman that are dark. Guess what? There are aspects of yourself that are dark. And I think this ties back to one of the faults of the nice guys because he's so in shadow about his own darkness. Then he
Mhm.
projects this idea onto women. It's like, oh, she's just this fairy princess and she just does all these nice things where it's like, no, there are some dark aspects to her. And instead of worried about that or crying about that or like, screw women, like they have this dark thing about them, it's like, cool, I want to understand them better. What does make them tick on a surface
Yeah.
level? What's deep into their biology? And then let me play it. Let me interact with them in the best way I can. Like I found the red pill stuff empowering to some extent, but some guys go so deep down the rabbit hole and it almost just like reinforces their victim thinking and identity. And they're like, oh, woman, like they'll just leave you for a guy in a Lambo, where like the underlying message is like, hey, be a respectful man. Do you even have your own respect? Like, cool, you might not have a Lambo, nothing wrong with that, but like, are you working towards something? Are you building something in your life? Women love that ambition, a guy on a purpose, a guy working towards a vision, not a guy crying about how he has it so tough and the girl's just going to leave him for a Lambo. So to me, in essence, like even seeing behind the curtain, this was like a big turning point for me in my journey. I was living in Vegas for a month and I had
Mhm.
experiences where I'd like slept with girls and they'd be lying in my bed and their boyfriend would call and be like, hey, what are you up to? She's like,
Yeah.
I'm just out with the girls and I'm like lying there. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is messed up. Um, But guess what? I'd been on the receiving end. I'd been that guy on the other side of the phone. So it was just interesting to be on the other side. Not that you have to do that, but I'm like, okay, I'm getting a more accurate view of all aspects of reality, not just the ones that I think are nice and just what people told me in a Disney story. But there was one specific moment where it was like, it was too much for me and I really changed things. I was like at a club in Vegas and I'd been there a couple of weeks and I was doing pretty well in terms of meeting girls and bringing them back. And there's one girl I like met and she was like a lawyer or something. She was cool and like we were very flirty. But then she kind of brought it up like, oh yeah, I'm here with my husband. He was like at a show or something like just outside and she was there with a couple of friends. But I could see there was like a level of interest. And this is where if you don't have your morals intact and your integrity intact, like it can lead to damaging things. And this was a big one for me where it's like, I ended up like, because I knew how to overcome objections and I knew how to do all of these things. I end up like leading this girl out the club, this woman out the club, and we end up like having sex in the bathroom. But I could see on her face like a part of her biology was going along with it because I was demonstrating these attractive qualities. But like, not only a part of her soul I could see like was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like even after me, I wasn't like walking away like, sweet, I got laid. I was like, whoa, like that was like way too much. You know, I went so far in this stuff where I was like, what the fuck's going on? And this is like the dark side of the dating stuff. If you aren't learning from a mentor who has that integrity, to me, it's almost like you're like one of those child soldiers, you know, you're like a 12-year-old with a bazooka. It's like you can do a lot of damage. That bazooka is deadly. It can cause a lot of harm. But guess what? I'm not trying to compare it to war here, but like when used in the right way, it can also be used for a lot of good. I like to compare learning dating skills as like going to Hogwarts. You're like learning powerful stuff. You can either use it for the dark side or you can use it for the light side. But yeah, man, I had a couple experiences that really like shook me and really made me investigate like who was I being as a man. Cool, I was getting all these results. Cool, I'd slept with hundreds of women, but like, was I even the man that I wanted to be? And even just introducing that into the conversation and let that be a part of men's decision-making process when looking for mentors in these areas, I think is a crucial factor.
Yeah, man. I think, as you said, that's why it's so important to work with someone who's been through the journey. Like a lot of business coaches, especially with the popular advice, they're like, oh, you should only be one step ahead of your client. No, you should be like 100 steps ahead of your client so that you know which blind spots they're about to hit, whether they're getting a bit too full of themselves now that they're seeing results. So you can kind of tell them like, look, you know, you're doing well, that's great, but don't make your whole identity this stuff now. And I think, as you said, part of the message here is like, how can we coach men to step into their fears, but still remain in that sense of integrity? Because otherwise, you know, I'm not here to feel bad about experiences you had or I had or feel any type of shame. You know, it is what it is. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. However, when I've been through situations like what you said, and I wonder if that's the case for you, it's like you take on a lot of karmic stuff as well. And I always tell people, like, I'm not a good person, or I don't try to be a good person just out of morals. I also think it leads to a more peaceful life. Because the thing is, since I did some of those things as well, and I found myself with girls, with boyfriends, then when I got into a relationship, guess who struggled with jealousy? Me. Because guess what? When your girl's hanging out with another female friend, you know what you did when you met girls who were hanging out with their female friends. And your woman can be the most trustworthy person ever, but there's still a part of you that's going, I wonder if there's a version of me out there who might try to pull this stuff off. And I struggled a lot with that, not in this relationship, but in a previous relationship I was in. And that really gave me the perspective of like, I'm not going to do this even when a woman's down, just because I know this is going to disturb my peace. And I think that's such a valuable decision, but at the same time, it's only a decision we can come to because we know that we have this skill set. For a guy who doesn't think he has it, they can get so sucked in the moment to go, well, this may be the first time I get something in the last few months. Who cares if she's in a relationship or she's married? And I think this is why, in a way, building the skill to approach and meet women as you want, if done in the healthy way, actually makes you a better guy, a guy with a higher sense of integrity, because you know, I don't need to be with that woman. You know, my friend's getting along well with that woman, and honestly, he could use some getting laid. He could ease up a little bit. I'm going to let him have this one. You know, she's in a relationship. I'm going to leave this one. I can do this anytime. And I think there's a sense of a higher level decision making that unlocks within you when you know, you truly believe. You don't have to go in the mirror and say, I can get woman, but you actually truly believe this is fine. I can meet women if I want, and I don't have to meet them to prove to myself or my friends that I can meet women if I want.
Yeah, so many good points there. Just as we were saying in the beginning, it's like an initiation. It's something that you need to do, but you don't need to, like you said, make your whole identity out of it. I was chatting to someone else on a podcast, and they're almost like in jiu-jitsu or something, which I haven't done, but like what they recommend is like get to a blue belt level. You know, you don't have to get all the way to black belt, but you just want to have a good, competent understanding of this. And I think that's a good way to approach the dating stuff. Like, you don't have to make your whole identity and world about this and get the hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter girls, because there's almost like a phase, like in the beginning, cool, you need to push through some of that. You need to break through some fears, because otherwise it's just an excuse, you know? Like the first girl that comes along, the guy's like, yeah, I'm just like not into, like, I don't want to go too far down the journey. It's like, no, man, like you're not there yet. Like, don't worry about it. Like, go have some more experiences. But like, I've even coached guys who've gotten like so good at like the technical stuff, but then it's like they forgot the reason they got into it in the first place, which is me as well. You know, it's like I wanted to have a cool relationship with a woman, and I want to have a family. And then it's like this dating identity I created. It was like sabotaging me from doing that. You spoke about some of the troubles you've had in relationships. For me, I was like sitting at a cafe, and it's like I can't even relax. You know, it's like there's a girl there, I could go speak to her, I could go get her number. It's like this momentum in my mind that just wouldn't let me relax. And yeah, I think that's why it's not for everyone, but I think exclusive relationships can be incredibly healing. Just like there's a lot of healing to be learned as being a single man. Most guys suck at being single. Most guys suck at being in relationships. You want to try to get good at both. Like, learn how to be good at single. Learn how to go out there and meet people and interact with women, and don't necessarily just go for the first one that you meet. Like, I think that can be dangerous as well. But like, go have some experiences so you get a more broad perspective. But then also, like, don't get lost in that either. If you do want to be a father one day, you do want to start a family, be careful of this like glamorized, like Dan Bilzerian lifestyle. Like, I think every guy who gets into dating like thinks he wants to be in an open relationship and like have threesomes and stuff like that. And like, that's cool if that's like genuinely what you want. But to me, it's almost like an immature mindset. And I was stuck in this where it's like, nah, I don't want to settle down, like, oh, open relationships, threesomes. But it's like, you're just scared of commitment. There's a part of you, that little Peter Pan boy, that no responsibility, I do whatever I want. It doesn't want to die, you know? And sometimes a serious relationship, hey, that makes you mature. It's not all just about you. You have to make sacrifices. And sometimes that's sacrificing all the other girls you could sleep with so you can build something really deep and meaningful with this one particular girl that you've chosen. That's a sacrifice you're making. That's a sign of maturity versus like trying to build up these like ridiculous rotations and trying to live your life like that forever, like the boy who doesn't want to grow up. I think that's a very dangerous road that a lot of men who get into the dating space go down. And I'm speaking from experience here.
Yeah. And in a way, I think after sleeping around for a long time, it almost feels like watching the same movie again. Like, you're not even excited to be with a new girl. You're just like, yeah, sure, this was cool. And I think there's a part of your emotional center that just starts dulling down in a way. And the way I love how you brought up there's growth in being single, but there's also growth in a relationship, because like before, this was the first time I got into an exclusive relationship since I learned this skill set. And
Mm.
I was in a relationship before, around a couple of years back, but that was a one-way open relationship. So the
Mm-hmm.
dynamic was a bit different, and it wasn't like full commitment. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember my friend who put this really well. He was like, "Look, Ege, you can't be half a gangster."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Hey, but my girl agrees with it. She doesn't care. I'm good. I'm having my fun and dating her. It's great." But that created so much suffering in my life and actually blocked a level of intimacy that I think you get by being exclusive with someone. Like you get such a deep level of intimacy. And before, I never understood how guys could be married and not like look at another woman. And now with my current girlfriend, there's such a high level of intimacy that, like, sure, you can notice when a woman's attractive, but there's no desire to like, oh my god, she's a different woman, because you have not just a physical connection but an emotional, spiritual, soul connection you built with your partner. And to you, that's a lot more attractive than like what you could have with someone you don't even know.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes that's just like a fake front, you know. It's like I was like, yeah, I just want to be in an open relationship, but it's like they're afraid of that commitment, because the more
Right.
you with someone, the deeper they see you, the more intimate you're required to be with them, open up to them in deeper layers. That being single, you don't really, oh, I'm going up, I'm meeting woman, cool, it's scary, it's all these things, I'm growing, but sometimes it lacks a depth, you know. I know, like you said, yeah, I'm watching the same movie. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a mentor of mine described it. It's like boasting about how many hot dogs you've eaten in your life. You know, it's like, cool, I've eaten this many hot dogs. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but no one really cares. Like, I've had this many one night stands. It's like, okay, that's cool, but it's like, there's no depth, there's no juice in that. And if you need to go on that for a little bit, go have those experiences, but don't get lost in them so much. Because just like you said, there's so much value in relationships. And I've obviously been with my
Mm-hmm.
partner now for like 5 years, but there was so
Wow.
many depths of it. At the start, it was very surface level, all these barriers up. And just over the years, just watching this like fear melt away, my insecurities melt away as my intimacy opened up, and it was so crazy linked. Like the intimacy I was able to experience was in direct correlation with how honest I was able to be with her and about myself,
Mm-hmm.
and even the levels in terms of sexuality and the sex we were able to experience. It like just opens up and goes into deeper and deeper layers. Like you might have sex with a girl one night stand, I was like, oh, I was raunchy and I was slapping her ass and stuff like that. That can be fun as well, but there's like so much deeper layers of sex that can be tapped into that girls don't even themselves have access to in a one night stand, because that takes a level of trust, it takes a level of authenticity, vulnerability, honesty, that takes time to build in a relationship. And that was like a big eye opener for me. I'm like, oh, isn't it boring? Like you just have sex with the same person over and over again. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, the depth that opens up. It's like so much juice in there. Like almost makes me look at the one night stand. I'm like, it's almost like a drug, you know. It's like a hit. Like cool, I get a quick dopamine rush, but it totally lacks that soul depth that I'm not even like completely there yet, but like just that I've
Mm-hmm.
started to experience and discover. I'm like, wow, this is an incredible. So yeah, I think that's really important for men as well.
That's awesome, man. And
Yeah.
Daniel, I have so much respect for you, because I think like a lot of guys who coach the side of living the single life and being able to meet women, it's really hard to make that transition to then be exclusive. And it's admirable that, you know, you built something for the past 5 years that really experiences that level of intimacy. And I think that's why, you know, for someone who wants to do that, your guidance is so valuable, right? Because it's one thing to give relationship advice as someone who's just dated around and hasn't even been in a relationship for the past few years, which I've done in the past. And now being in a relationship, you just see a completely different perspective. And I think there's a lot of value in that as well. And like, just like you said, the thing that made me realize okay, maybe I'm getting a bit tired of this was last November. I did a 3-week retreat with a mentor of mine, Pierre, and I came out of that retreat. And I remember like talking to women, knowing what to do on a date, cool woman. But I remember being on dates and thinking like, I'd rather just be meditating right now. But it's almost like your ego doesn't want to do that because there's an attachment to being the successful guy with women. And then you feel almost the need to date women, not because you want to, but to protect the identity that you built. So I had this joke with a client of mine who was working with me in person for a week or a month and a half. And I was like, I'm retired, man. Like, I'm going to take it easy. But then it's like, I would try to go to the coffee shop and end up meeting a girl and end up going on a date. And he would be like, I thought you were retired. I'm like, I guess not. And I did that for a couple of months, just unconsciously living that karma almost before realizing, wait, I just really don't care to do this right now. So I think I love that you're able to do that transition because I think it takes such a level of self awareness to almost unplug yourself from the drug, as you put it, because it can be a drug. It's so much excitement and you feel powerful and you feel like this hit of like, wow, I just did that, which is something people don't talk about. Like, evolutionarily, I think you feel like the king of the world for a few seconds, and that feeling can get very addicting.
Mm. Yeah, and you can trust your own feelings with this. It's like when you know you still have things to learn, it's like, I approached that girl, I was nervous, I got her number. It's like
Right.
okay, that's a sign of growth. You still feel all those feelings with it. But then like the longer you go down, it's like, yeah, I just made out with that girl in the day. And it's like you feel like dead inside, or like maybe you had a little hitch, like I just
Mm.
went on a date with that girl, I just slept with that girl, but it's like the classic feeling is like, oh, I felt empty afterwards. That's a
Mhm.
signal. And I wish I'd known this earlier because it took me years. I'll be like, no, like still more. Like I just needed a hotter
Right.
girl or like a crazier experience. But like if you start getting to that point, it's like, okay, you need to transition. You need to think about things differently. If you're still on that high and you're still getting excited and you're getting a date with a girl that you've never had before and you spoke to a girl in the day and it went well, awesome. There's juice there. Your soul's saying, look, there's things to learn. There's things you got to experience. But it almost hits like a tipping point where it's like, okay, you've had your fun now. But for a lot of guys,
Mhm.
it's like you said, it's a feeling of power. It's an empowerment, which is good. But then it's like, you don't want to let go. It's like, no more. And it's like, I don't want to go. I don't want to let go of this. And that can be very, very destructive in the long term. The dating space is full of these guys. Look at my lay count, 1,100 and blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, if you're impressed by that stuff, like, go for that. But, like, if you actually look and serious about yourself, like, there's to me, that's not an accomplishment. There's a lot of other things going on there. So, yeah,
Yeah.
pick your battles wisely.
Yeah. And I think to add to what you said, what you fear the most looks different based on where in the
Mm,
journey you are. So
mm,
the way I noticed that, okay, maybe it's time to get into a relationship was I was having this conversation with a mentor of mine, Thomas Wiggum. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him, but I remember like when me and my girlfriend first started dating and we weren't officially together, there was something that happened that made me feel jealous. And Thomas was like, dude, you really need to own your jealousy. Clearly you feel like he dove into the emotion and we were
mm,
talking. And I realized, wow, I do feel jealous about this. And in that moment, there's a part of me that was like, I would rather approach like 20 groups of women in like an event that just looks crazy than to tell this girl, hey, you did this. And I felt jealous. And I
mm,
was like, whoa. And that's when I realized for me, the path is going deeper into that
mm,
because doing the approaching is comfortable now. It's like running a warm up lap. I'm not even playing the game, I'm just running warm up laps, thinking I'm getting better. But what I'm getting better at is like a warm up lap.
mm.
Whereas there's this thing that I'm scared to do and I'm running away from that. So I think that's why, as you said, self-awareness is so key, because if you still have fears around approaching, then follow that. But if you do that long enough, especially with the right mentor, those fears are going to eventually fall away, and your mind's going to trick you about like, oh, no, 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 you should keep doing this. It's important. But your real fear actually lies somewhere else.
Yeah, I think you put that so well. I didn't even realize, but I made a post about that like a year ago. It's like, oh, I don't know how long ago, like why
Mhm.
I decided to get a girlfriend. And it's exactly what you said before, was like going out to a room full of people was intimidating. Talking to a girl was intimidating. Like having awesome sexual experiences, that was intimidating. But after a while I did that, I'm like, that's not intimidating for me anymore, you
Right.
know? But settling down with one girl, oh my God, like that was super
Right.
scary. And I didn't do that for a long time. And then I'm like, am I even being in integrity? Because I was looking at the students, like I'm telling these guys to step up into their fears, but am I even doing that for myself? Or am I just playing in this area in which I'm comfortable? And that helped me like step into that new level of growth. And what an exclusive relationship does, which is just like you said, there's that level of vulnerability. It doesn't have to be an exclusive relationship, but it's a great way to learn it. It's like, hey, I felt jealous and I wanted to communicate that with you. When you're just dating
Mhm.
women casually and living the single life, you never even have to go to that kind of vulnerability level. And in fact, like you get stuck running the warm-up lap, as you put it. I see some of these coaches, they're like the frat boys, like out at the party and like more party and like more party.
Right.
But it's like, dude, I think like you just need to be like more intimate with a woman, you know? Maybe there's some other things that you using that to now cover up, just as the guy will play video games because he's scared to face the fear of going to approach a woman. Then you get the
Mhm.
guys are like approaching women over because they're scared to open up in a deeper, vulnerable way. So to me, that's a sign of evolution. It's a sign of growth. Cool, you're moving on
Mhm.
to other things that are now opening up for you to work on. But like you said, having that self-awareness, what is that thing for me right now? Is it approaching women? Wow, I'm really scared and intimidated by that. Cool, that's going to be my focus. And then as you go along that journey, be able to, okay, cool, I've learned what I had to learn. What's the next thing
Mhm.
that I'm being called to do?
Dude, definitely. And I think that's why having the right mentor really helps, because like that's the thing, right? If I wasn't having that conversation with Thomas, I would have thought, don't really care about that. Let me go speak to some other girls now. And I did that for such a long time. And I think that's why I personally believe mentorship with the right people are so valuable. And a lot of the money I make in my business is invested back into mentorship, because it's like those conversations are what saves you years of suffering that you may have had if you did not realize that blind spot. And I think if someone works with a high level thinker coach who can not just give you what you want, oh, you want this 3 questions to ask to connect to this girl, let's give you that. Who doesn't just give you that, but actually gives you what you need, which may be, what's the reason you're so focused on connecting when you're telling me you don't even want to be approaching anymore, and really diving deep into those core drives so that people can understand these questions for themselves and realize for themselves like, oh, I thought I wanted this, but I actually want this now. And the thing is, when you do that, like when you live with that level of unity of your mind with your heart and with integrity, that's when you're the most attractive. It's not through someone else's stuff. It's when you're in integrity with yourself and your mind and your heart are united and you're truly following your ideal way of living. I think that's when anyone's at their most attractive.
Yeah, perfectly said. And I think that's a great point to wrap this very interesting, very rich conversation on today. So everyone listening in, I highly recommend checking out Ege's stuff. Great coach, great guy. You've heard it for yourself on today's podcast. Ege, where's the best place if guys are interested in your coaching, interested in working with you? Where's the best place for them to find you? We'll obviously link everything down
Mhm.
in the comments below. But if you just want to drop where people can find you, that'll be helpful for them.
Yeah, for sure. The best place to get in touch with me is probably Facebook. Just search Ege Reynolds on Facebook, and then you'll probably find my profile. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can also just find my YouTube channel, The Charming Man, so that it's not a platform switch and you're on the same platform. But I'd say those are the two places to get in touch.
Awesome. Fantastic. We'll put those links to your Facebook and your YouTube below. Definitely go check him out. Definitely go reach out to him if this is something that you're interested in improving in your dating life. So, Ege, really appreciate you coming on the Magnetic Man today, and hope you enjoyed
Thank you.
it as well, man.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, cool stuff, guys. And we will see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed it today. Bye bye for now.